Hello, and welcome to this podcast for the fiveislandseye blogspot. I'm Liz Radley. Today I'm speaking to David Redfield, who's a freelance writer, poet and creative writing tutor living in Norfolk. But he's also hugely inspired in his work by the beautiful Isles of Scilly, and he's been a regular visitor to the islands for over 25 years. This spring, he's been working with the Scilly community on an online poetry writing project. So, David, what can you tell us about the Lockdown Spring Renga Project? How did it come about, for example?
Well, my initial inspiration for it was actually something completely personal. My niece lives in Japan on the main island of Honshu, and this May my wife and I were due to fly out there to attend her wedding. Obviously, in the current lockdown situation, due to coronavirus, we're not able to do that, so the idea kind of grew from that seed. And I've been so looking forward to immersing myself in the cultural background. Japan is somewhere that I've never visited before, and it has a very venerable literary history. It's very different from the European one.
Absolutely. And
I've always enjoyed writing in Japanese forms. The particular form used in Renga is the short 3-line haiku, and it's one that people, I think, know quite a lot about in English.
Yeah, it's relatively well known as a poetic form, isn't it? They're written in schools, for example.
Yeah, that's right. That's absolutely it. Yeah, about 15 or so years ago, I published a book of haiku that was inspired by Scilly, and I've been looking forward to returning to that territory and kind of going back to the source of that poetry. In fact, there are 4 particular haiku poets who are very much celebrated in Japan, and one of them, coincidentally, comes from the area that my niece lives in. So I had particularly looked forward to making the connection there.
Right.
Obviously, when that couldn't happen, there was a sort of feeling, well, what can I replace that expectation with? And I'd thought when we'd planned the trip that I might write a blog when I was there, but then I thought about the old Japanese writing tradition of Renga, which involves a kind of collaborative writing group, and it just felt that that would be a perfect thing to organise in this kind of environment and in this kind of climate as a way to draw people together.
Yes, and it requests, if you like, it demands that you have a community to do the writing.
Yes, absolutely. And that's how it operated originally in 17th century Japan. So it seems the ideal creative project for these times.
Okay. So how long have you been planning or thinking about this?
Well, my wife and I have actually been in lockdown ourselves for probably longer than most people have been officially locked down. We've been isolated now for about 7 weeks, I think. And I think this idea, I had this idea quite early on. It didn't take very long to plan. I think I spent 2 or 3 days on the idea, but the actual haiku themselves have been written and posted online for about a month now. So it's getting on for about 4 weeks.
Okay. And of course, you've said posted, and originally, obviously, this wouldn't in the 17th century have been done online. But with everybody being locked down, I suppose it offers itself to an online community.
Yes, completely. It certainly does that. And I think it's an excellent way to try and unite people who are living in a kind of isolation. The idea behind Renga is that it's a chain poem in which each contributor writes a haiku, and that then becomes the springboard for the next verse.
Ah.
So each verse is meant to be a self-contained poem, but it also helps move the piece forward.
Okay, so how did you find those writers? Were they people you already knew, perhaps?
No, far from it, actually. I was very keen from the beginning that this should be a community project. So my initial mail shot, if you like, I made through my Facebook page. What I really wanted, crucially, was people who would have enthusiasm for the idea. Writing experience wasn't necessarily a sort of qualification, and so non-writers were very welcome to apply, and that's how it's gone on. That's how it's continued.
And do you only want writers who are living on the islands?
No, not at all. My only stipulation really is that people should be either islanders or visitors like myself, but certainly people who've had some sort of connection with Scilly and who enjoy and respond to the people and the environment there.
Okay, and what has the response been like?
The response has been fantastic, actually. I've been so impressed with the way that people have embraced this. They've really taken to it very, very well, and it's wonderful and gratifying that people have been able to write about their personal experiences, and this, I think, is a very important part of what I'm trying to achieve here.
So it's not simply based on Scilly, it's also reflective of the current situation.
Yes. This COVID crisis is highly isolating. What I really want is to give people the chance to articulate how they're coping with the lockdown situation, which of course in Scilly is quite interesting.
And probably different to most of the rest of the UK, I think.
Yes, absolutely. And
the contributions you've had, what sort of things have there been? Is there anything particularly impressive or surprising or unexpected?
I think what's been very pleasing is how well people have taken to the form. Because as a short form, it's very good for very minute observation, so you can create quite vivid sketches like thumbnail sketches.
Mm-hmm.
And I think almost without exception all of the writers so far have been able to achieve that.
Good.
They've been able to write about very concrete things that they're observing and things that they're experiencing, and I'm enormously impressed with that, and also how people are finding verse on verse, poem on poem,
Mm-hmm.
new aspects of the lockdown situation to be able to write about.
And of course, what we've seen during this last couple of months is that people are turning to creative ways of expressing themselves during their time in lockdown. And I guess that you're tapping into that, aren't you?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I hope that this would be an interesting writing challenge from my point of view, but also that it could be more than just another distraction for people during this period. You know, that people could
Mm-hmm.
find in it a way to maybe contact something in their inner selves and hopefully alleviate some of the pressure that they're feeling, you know.
Yeah.
It's something positive to look forward to.
And to feel a part of.
Yeah, and what's very heartening about the haiku themselves that are being produced is just how many of them are forward looking. Many of them are looking at the ways in which this situation could be a positive thing, because, you know, let's not forget that apart from the human sort of social implications of the world in lockdown, there are also some environmental benefits.
Yeah.
And the poem as it stands at the moment certainly reflects that, and people will probably go on writing about it in that way.
Okay, so how long do you anticipate this project lasting? Are you still looking for writers?
I would like the project to continue for about another sort of month or so. It would be good to have another 5 or 6 people to be involved if possible.
And how can they get in touch with you?
Well, they can contact me through my Facebook page, personal messaging me in the first instance, or there's a number of other Facebook pages. One is the Isles of Scilly notice board, the Five Islands Eye, of course. Another one is Johnny Mac's Jukebox, which is for Islands FM 107.9, and the St Mary's Libraries page. But people can also contact me through my own writing page at Write Out Loud, and the address is www.writeoutloud.net/profiles/David Redfield.
Thank you. But of course, David, this isn't the only Renga project you're running at the moment, is it? You're also working on one which is a little closer to home.
Yes, I'm concurrently running a project in the town where I live, which is Fakenham in North Norfolk, and that's a fascinating challenge as well.
That all sounds such a very positive thing to be involved in these very uncertain and unsettling times. So we wish you all the very best with the remainder of your project, David, and we thank you very much indeed for talking to me. And just to remind people, go to Facebook and look for David Redfield if you're interested in taking part. Thank you, David, for talking to me. Goodbye.
Thank you, Liz, and Five Islands Eye for giving me the opportunity. So I'm going to read the text of the Scilly Renga poem so far as it stands at the moment, a month into this extraordinary online writing challenge. I want to sincerely thank all the writers who've contributed so far to this piece of work, and also to welcome anyone listening who feels that they might like to participate. All of these writers have been brave enough to let their efforts be made public, and I'd like to congratulate them all on their bravery in doing so. It's never easy to risk sharing something you've made with a larger audience, but I'd also like to praise each of them for their abilities and for their enthusiasm in embracing this idea. Each and every one of these short poems shines a light into the current lockdown situation we are all facing, and does so with the true spirit of haiku, using clarity of expression, concrete vividness of image, and a meditative quality that takes the words beyond their narrow container and makes us think as well as feel, perhaps even after the words themselves have faded from memory. I'd like to hope that the great Japanese haiku masters, Basho, Buson, Issa, and Shiki, would recognize these poems as authentic testimony to the extraordinary and unforgettable spring of 2020. The poem doesn't yet have a title. I'm hoping that one will present itself as the work progresses, but in the meantime, the group writing credit goes to the Lockdown Spring Renga Project. The haiku poets themselves are, in alphabetical order, Helen Ellsworth, Jane Hurd, Liz Radley, David Redfield, and David Smith. I hope that some of you may still join them. The Lockdown Spring Renga Project. Spring has come. Scilly lies cut off, locked down, and blue. The sea will lift us. Cows grazing. Green grass where tents would be pitched. Nature reclaims its birthright. Gigs search for their crews, their colours bright in the sun. The race postponed now. Everything's quiet except for the birds singing. Listen and enjoy. Birdsong crescendos. Light quivers through my curtains, and I am wakeful. The crab pots sit, dry, empty on the idle quay. No guests to feed now. Diesel rainbows fade. Dark clears under the surface, and new life begins. Thank you very much for listening.